Hi everyone, welcome to the Sound Mind podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of music psychology. I'm your host, Sophia, and as a music psychologist, I'll be guiding you through everything you've ever wondered about music. So, whether you're a music lover or just interested in the science of sound, I was spending the right place. So, stick with us. And it got me realizing how long I've been hearing Christmas music already, everywhere. Literally the day after Halloween, I think. And it just got me thinking about the world of music and advertising. And I was so surprised to realize that I haven't done an episode on this already. I think, especially this time of the year, you walk into a mall, the air smells like cinnamon, the lights are all warm, and before you've even started looking, you hear Christmas songs. And within seconds, you kind of feel this rush. It's like a kind of festive nudge that somehow makes you want to buy something that you didn't even plan to buy that day. And honestly, Christmas is like the world's annual marketing experiment. It's not an accident. Music is one of the most powerful tools in advertising and retail, shaping what we choose, how long we stay, and even how we feel about spending, often without us even realizing it. From TV ads to just aisles in a store, the soundtrack around us is actually doing far more than just setting the mood. It's literally steering our behavior. Now, festive music in particular, it carries this emotional weight of nostalgia, warmth, childhood memories, excitement, and even a sense of social connection. It changes tempo, it changes mood, and in December, even early November, it's everywhere, which actually makes it the perfect case study because if Christmas music can shift how we feel and how we spend, what does that say about the rest of the year? So, how exactly does music in ads, in shops, and just in the background of our daily lives influence our decisions, consciously or unconsciously? Let's dive into it in today's episode. So, music is far more than decoration when it's used in advertising and retail. It's honestly a carefully crafted psychological tool. At its most basic level, music shapes how we feel. And we know that a gentle, slow melody can evoke a sense of warmth and comfort, while a fast, energetic beat can provoke excitement or urgency. And these emotional cues don't just sit in the background, they enter our minds, influence our mood, and they prime us to behave in ways that are beneficial to marketers. So when you're relaxed, you're actually more likely to linger, browse, and discover these unplanned purchases. And when your energy is pumped up, you might act more impulsively, buy quickly, or just feel a sense of urgency that actually drives sales. But emotion is only one piece of the puzzle. Music also acts as a powerful branding tool, conveying a brand's personality, identity, and values in ways that visuals or slogans often can't replicate. So brands subtly build these kind of sonic identities through jingles, tempos, harmony, and these kind of motifs that become part of their audio signature, I guess. And just think of those few recognizable notes of a well-loved jingle that kind of goes around in your head. Even just that short musical phrase can really anchor a brand deeply in your memory. It really signals this is who we are, more viscerally than any tagline, I think. So I grew up in the UK, and I think our adverts are pretty iconic, to be honest. I love a British advert, and we had some real memorable ones when I was a kid, and those songs still go around in my mind, and some of them are actually still on TV today. I think just off the top of my mind, I think about Autoglass. They have a really catchy jingle, and actually it's quite funny, like when I moved to Sweden where I live now, they actually have the same advert here but in Swedish, and I remember when I heard that tune I just instantly recognized it as Autoglass even though it was in a different language. So that really anchors it to the brand. Silly example, but there's many others I could talk about. I think they're very regional specific, but yeah, you get the gist. But this interplay between sound and memory is central to why music is so effective. Our brains are naturally attuned to patterns, and music, especially melodic or rhythmic music, provides this rich, emotionally laden structure that helps us remember. And research has shown that background music in stores can actually create stronger brand associations because when that melody sticks in your head, it doesn't just bring back the music, it brings back how you felt in that moment, just like those memories that I have from childhood advertisements. And that emotional recall is precisely what marketers hope to leverage. So I guess that makes me a marketer's dream. But let's get into a little bit more of the musical characteristics. So rhythm, tempo, and genre actually play a huge role in guiding our behavior. So the speed of the song has been widely studied, and the results are actually so interesting. So in retail settings, like I briefly said, slower music can induce shoppers to move more slowly, browse more thoroughly, and ultimately spend more money. A classic study found that when slow tempo music was played in a supermarket, shoppers' pace slowed and the store's sales increased significantly. But on the flip side, fast music, particularly in dense or busy environments, can actually accelerate customer movement and even drive up sales per hour. For example, a study at convenience stores found that fast-paced background music increased the amount of purchases per hour, especially among more impulsive shoppers. Another 6-week field experiment actually showed that in a grocery chain, when they played fast music during peak hours, the total basket value went up by about 8% compared to no music, which is pretty crazy. But stores also might use fast music during these peak times to actually make people move a little bit faster and kind of keep that traffic moving, which I think is really interesting as well. But there's actually even more nuance there. Tempo affects not just how fast we move, but also the variety of what we buy. So one study demonstrated that fast tempo background music increases consumers' variety-seeking behavior. And this is actually mediated by arousal. So basically, faster music pumps up arousal, which in turn makes people buy more diverse items, which is, pretty crazy. And actually, that effect actually depends on how familiar people are with the music. So it was found that when people know the music well, tempo actually has a stronger influence. So that's one correlation there as well. But of course, music doesn't work in a vacuum. This concept of musical fit, or congruence, as it's called, is central to marketing strategy. So this means aligning the music with the brand message, the product, and the context. When the music matches, it amplifies the intended impression. But when it clashes, you risk confusing or even alienating customers. And research does support this as well. So one study found that the impact of different musical dimensions like tempo and volume depends on how congruent the music feels with the store's identity. And that mismatch can really weaken the emotional response from customers. And there's even fascinating examples of music shaping more than just emotion and pacing. So in one experiment, which I've always found absolutely fascinating, one wine shop alternated between French and German background music. And when French-style music played, customers bought more French wine. But when German music played, you guessed it, more German wine got bought. And most customers reported that they didn't even notice the connection, or they were unaware that the music actually influenced their choice. And this kind of subliminal cueing is quite scary, but it does show how deep music's influence runs. We often don't consciously register that a melody is steering our decision, but it really can do so quite powerfully. Now, when we're watching an advert, it's easy to assume that the music was chosen because it just sounds nice or it fits the vibe. But behind the scenes, the process is far more deliberate and deeply psychological. Music is chosen strategically through a combination of creative instinct, behavioral research, and brand identity work as well. In most agencies, the decision is made long before the ad is even filmed, actually. Creative teams tend to start off by defining the emotional arc of an advert, the feeling that they want the audience to experience, and crucially, the emotion that they want to leave them with in the final seconds before the brand logo kind of pops up. And music, it becomes that anchor that holds the emotional arc together. Marketers often begin with what's called a musical brief, and this is a structured set of guidelines that outline the desired mood, tempo, genre, and energy. It's essentially a blueprint for the type of music that supports the story that's being told. And this isn't random. Like I mentioned, research shows that music which is congruent with the narrative significantly increases the effectiveness of an ad, particularly emotional engagement and recall as well. Creative teams then use the music to shape the storyline. So if an ad needs to feel uplifting, they might choose major keys with these kind of rising melodic contours. If the story needs tension, they'll look for the slower builds, the minor keys, and kind of a sparse instrumentation. And in emotional storytelling ads, especially those for Christmas, music often determines when the viewer should feel this swell of hope, relief, nostalgia, or connection. And we also see that, in like insurance companies or charity campaigns. And researchers have found that synchronizing emotional beats in music with transitions in the visual narrative actually enhances both attention and emotional intensity. So, in other words, when the soundtrack and storyline move together, the viewer feels it more strongly and remembers it more clearly. But many brands also stick to what you could call a music blueprint. And this is consistent style or sonic personality that runs across different campaigns, similar genres, tempos, or emotional tones that make the brand feel familiar and stable. So think about Apple's clean, minimal, upbeat kind of indie electronic style. Nike have their motivational, rhythm-driven sound, and Coca-Cola have this kind of warm acoustic instrumentation. These patterns aren't aesthetic coincidences. A large amount of research in sonic branding shows that this consistency in music improves brand recognition, perceived trustworthiness, and also emotional attachment. When listeners repeatedly experience the same musical world, the brand begins to feel like a character with a kind of recognizable voice. And then you've got the strategic decision between jingles, licensed tracks, and original scores, each of these serving very different psychological functions. So, starting off with jingles. As short as they are, they've got an extreme impact. Because of their repetitive structures and simple melodies, they really create strong memory traces, exactly what advertisers want. Like I said earlier, all those jingles that are stuck in my head for the rest of my life. A classic study on mnemonic branding actually showed that jingles are among the most effective tools for long-term recall, especially when the product category is crowded. And on the other hand, you've got licensed tracks, which leverage familiarity. So when an ad uses a popular song, it borrows the emotional associations that we already have with that music. And research consistently shows that familiar songs increase attention, emotional engagement, and even perceived product quality. Now, when I think about familiar songs in an advertising setting, and especially because we're talking about Christmas, I always think of the John Lewis Christmas adverts. And if you've never seen them, I recommend you to go and check them out on YouTube. Every year, it's like a huge thing in the UK to reveal the John Lewis Christmas ad of the year. And the song choice is such a key part of that. It's always a familiar song, but it's always a redone version, a kind of repriced version. And yeah, it's amazing. There's been some amazing ones in there, and they used to always make Christmas #1. That was how popular they were when everyone was glued to their TVs to watch John Lewis ads and stream the music. So yeah, definitely check them out if you haven't seen some of them. They're always very emotional. But then you've also got the use of instrumental scores as well. And these are used when brands want this emotional nuance without having the interference of lyrics. It supports the tone of the ad, but allows the visuals and the brand message to shine in that moment. But finally, there's the question of who decides. In many campaigns, music is treated like a core strategic asset, not just an afterthought. Big brands involve dedicated music supervisors, behavioral consultants, and even some neuroscientists who specialize in audio perception. Some agencies run audio testing using biometric data to predict which options will be the most emotionally effective. And other teams rely on psychological frameworks. For example, choosing music that matches the emotional peak end rule, which is when people are more likely to remember what is at the end. So the final emotion lingers strongly after the advert ends. But in smaller agencies or for those more kind of low budget campaigns, music is sometimes chosen a bit more intuitively, what we might call a vibe approach. A creative director or editor picks something that simply feels right. And interestingly, even in those cases, they often subconsciously follow established psychological principles, so using tempo to drive pacing, key signatures to signal emotion, or instrumentation that aligns with brand identity. So whether it's explicitly guided by science or by instinct from years of experience, I think the same patterns tend to emerge, which is really interesting. But in the end, choosing music for ads is both art and strategy mixed together. It's really a blend of emotional craftsmanship, brand psychology, and behavioral science. The best campaigns out there, they don't just use music as background. They really use it as a central creative force that really shapes the story and what the audience feels, remembers, and ultimately chooses. Now I want to focus on our case study. So, coming up to Christmas and what actually inspired this episode, there's no season like Christmas when it comes to the power of music. For retailers, it's the ultimate audio experiment. It's like a time-tested moment where nearly every shopper walks into this carefully curated soundscape designed to tug at your heartstrings, light up these memory circuits in your brain, and basically open your wallet. So first, let's talk about why Christmas music works so strongly. It's not just about the bells and the sleighs. This music taps into the deep wells of nostalgia. Now, I explored this in an article that I wrote on Medium a while back, but essentially, Christmas songs often reside in our reminiscence bump, meaning that they evoke memories from our formative years. So think childhood holidays, family traditions, and warm gatherings. And that sense of emotional safety, of being wrapped in something familiar, makes us more receptive, more generous, and more willing to linger. Nostalgia isn't just sentimental, it actually has real behavioral effects. Research shows that when we feel nostalgic, our attachment to money actually weakens, which is crazy. In that warm, reflective state, generosity goes up and resistance to spending goes down. That's why during the holidays, retailers lean into these sentimental tracks. They're not just evoking memories, they're actually priming us to feel generous, connected, and even charitable. It's literally a frame shift. We're not just buying for ourselves, but for others, and that's really powerful for brands. And then there's the shared soundtrack effect. When we're in a store and we hear, let's say, Silent Night or Mariah Carey, we're not just listening, we're literally participating in a collective emotional moment. The music becomes part of this shared memory, a communal space. And there was one study done by Mood Media in 2024 where nearly 80% of shoppers actively notice Christmas music in store, and 3/4 of them said that it makes the shopping experience more enjoyable. And that unity just helps reinforce the message of holiday giving, togetherness, warmth, and tradition. But of course, not all festive music is the same, and how retailers choose their holiday soundtrack actually matters a lot. According to some industry data, modern shoppers are asking for more than just the same old tunes over and over again. Some prefer a blend of the old classics and newer Christmas songs put together, this kind of traditional and modern mix. And that gives brands a chance to feel both nostalgic and relevant as well. But then there's the choice of tempo and style. So slow, gentle instrumental versions are used when they want customers to linger, to reflect, and to browse, like I said. And then you've got those busier shopping times where the faster, more upbeat versions of festive tracks help maintain that traffic flow that I mentioned earlier and keep the energy up. And then there's some shops that actually lean into instrumental arrangements because they do retain this warm ambience without the potential overload of the vocals, which actually reduces cognitive fatigue for customers. One of the most famous examples, I think, of music driving holiday marketing comes from Coca-Cola, and that's the Holidays Are Coming campaign. Think about that jingle, which is paired with the just absolutely iconic visuals of the trucks rolling through the snow. This has been running globally since the mid-1990s, and its power lies in the combination of melody, nostalgia, and emotional storytelling. The music signals celebration, warmth, and togetherness, almost creating this kind of Pavlovian response for viewers that, okay, once this ad comes on, it's officially Christmas time. And studies of similar long-running campaigns show that when a melody is actually repeated annually, it does strengthen that brand association, reinforces memory, of course, and also primes the audience for seasonal spending. So in this case, the music doesn't just complement the ad, it is the ad. Millions of people hear those first notes and immediately think of holidays, generosity, and, of course, Coke. It's a textbook example of how the right song can become a cultural cue, just blending emotion, nostalgia, and consumer behavior. But there is a dark side to all of this. Overexposure is real, and actually looping the same holiday songs on repeat can really quickly go from cozy to grating. Customers may start with joy, but after the 100th replay, irritation can definitely set in. And even worse, think about the employees, the people who hear these tracks literally all day, every day. They often report burnout. And one clinical psychologist actually puts it that retail workers tune out Christmas music just to function because the constant repetition actually drains them. And there's also a psychological curve to this here. Music familiarity follows this kind of inverted U model, where repeated exposure increases liking only up to this peak point, and then repetition can actually really become dull or aggravating. And even worse, when Christmas tunes become earworms, so when they get stuck in your head without warning or control, that pleasantness really can flip. So I think all of this just makes Christmas the perfect case study of music manipulation, in a way, done right and done wrong. When retailers balance nostalgia, tempo, and variety, they evoke generosity, warmth, and loyalty as well. But when the playlist is poorly curated, repetitive, or just blatantly commercial, the very tool that they're using to connect can very quickly backfire. Some customers pull away, staff become annoyed and fatigued, and what was meant to feel magical starts to feel very manufactured. So, next time you're browsing around your local mall up until the holiday season, just remember that Christmas music in retail, it isn't just a festive decoration. It's a high-stakes behavioral tactic shaped by all of these different parts of psychology. The holiday season for us, it might be about giving, but for brands, it's also about tuning into our emotions and making us spend. And on that note of kind of the flip side of music, I do want to finish off today's episode by discussing that and touching upon it, because music really can be a brand's secret weapon, but like any powerful tool, it can misfire. The wrong soundtrack can turn an ad, a retail environment, or even just an entire campaign from compelling into off-putting. I think one of the most obvious missteps here is just tone-deaf musical choices. So imagine pairing a melancholic minor key ballad with a high-energy celebratory ad. The dissonance between what customers see and hear can confuse or even alienate them. And research in advertising psychology shows that this emotional incongruence between audio and visuals reduces the effectiveness of an ad and also lowers brand recall and can even generate negative attitudes towards the product as well. And similarly, when you're in a retail setting, music that is too fast, too loud, or mismatched to the shopping environment can literally push customers out of the door. So studies by North and Hargreaves and colleagues in the late 1990s actually demonstrated that shoppers adjust their pace according to tempo, as we've seen in those previous studies that I mentioned earlier. But when the music tempo is poorly chosen, it can actually increase stress rather than sales, showing just how fine the line is between influence and irritation. Another risk is that music can actually overshadow the brand message. When a song is highly familiar, emotionally powerful, or even extremely catchy, it can capture attention at the expense of the product itself. So, classic research on the attentional blink in advertising highlights this exactly. Viewers or shoppers might remember the song, but actually fail to connect it to the advertised brand. And these popular licensed tracks in particular are really a double-edged sword. When familiarity can draw attention, studies shows that if the emotional associations of the song are too strong or too personally charged, the consumer might just attend to the song rather than the intended marketing message. So, in practical terms, a Christmas classic blasting through the speakers might get everyone humming and singing along, but they might hum it long after they've forgotten what store they were in or what they were meant to buy. The ideal soundtrack should enhance the memory of the brand, basically, not compete with it. But then there's also this bigger, more philosophical question: the ethics of emotional manipulation. Marketing with music often works precisely because it bypasses conscious reasoning, shaping behavior subtly and honestly sometimes unconsciously. And this raises important questions. Is it ethical to use music to make people spend more, linger longer, or feel generous when they might not have otherwise? Scholars in consumer psychology and ethics have debated this for a long time, particularly with these manipulative nudges that exploit mood and memory. Basically, some argue that ethical lines are crossed when music is designed to induce compulsive buying, exacerbate impulsivity, or exploit vulnerable populations even. And others suggest that when used transparently and thoughtfully, music is just another part of creating a compelling, immersive experience, no different from visual design, scent marketing, or product placement. In either case, I think that the debate really highlights that marketers have this subtle form of emotional influence over us, one that can enhance the consumer experience when done responsibly, but easily cross into manipulation if carelessly applied, or carefully applied, even. And finally, even small miscalculations like a jarring genre choice, an overly repetitive track, or a tempo that conflicts with the consumer environment can have these outsized effects. Like I mentioned with the Christmas music, research indicates that repeated exposure to poorly chosen music can generate this fatigue, irritation, or even brand avoidance. In retail and advertising, one wrong beat can undo months of careful brand work. The flip side of music's power is really in its vulnerability. It's the tool that can increase spending, loyalty, and emotional resonance, but it can just as easily erode if applied without that nuance, care, or kind of understanding of the psychological mechanisms at play. But I think this really reminds us that music and marketing overall, it's not inherently good or bad. It's really an instrument. It's a tool. And its effectiveness depends on multiple different factors like congruence, context, and also that ethical calibration. When brands get it wrong, the consequences are pretty immediate and measurable. Frustrated customers, diminished recall, and potentially a long-lasting negative impression. It's really this high-stakes balancing act that demands the same strategic rigor as the creative message itself, I think. But, of course, the ethical question remains. When does emotional influence become manipulation? As marketers craft increasingly sophisticated sonic experiences, and also with the emergence of AI as well, awareness of that fine line is essential. Music can create joy, togetherness, and memory, but it can also exploit our emotions. For listeners and consumers, I really think that means that awareness is key. And for marketers, it means responsibility. So maybe this episode changes your next trip to the mall or how you watch the next advert that you see. I think music marketing is such a fun industry and such a fun little exercise that you can do. You know, adverts are everywhere around us. There's no escaping them these days. Even when we're scrolling through our feeds, we're met with advertisements. So the least you can do is be aware of what you're seeing. And if an advert does stick with you, have a think. Is it because of the music? Is it because of the emotional message? Is it because of a combination of both? And also tell me, what are some of your favorite adverts? I absolutely love watching adverts, honestly, especially when they're done well. I really think that it's such a powerful tool and such a special skill to be able to put the perfect music together to craft the perfect brand story. So yeah, let me know any adverts that you've seen recently or maybe from your childhood even that really just stick with you. But that is all I have for you for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Sound Mind. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate or review on wherever you're listening and share it with someone who loves music or advertisements just as much as you do. Don't forget to follow us and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And also, come and say hi over on Instagram and on Threads at The Sound Mind Talks. Like I said, let me know. Would love to know your thoughts. But until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and I'll see you on The Sound Mind.